Hey, Stan.
Here we go. Yes.
So Floda, as you saw, initially said he wasn't going to make it. Then he said he was going to make it. So let's see what happens.
Okay.
Did you happen to write up any of the notes you were talking about previously?
You'll find them posted on on Skype. Basically, all I'm really saying to you is, after I sat down and really went to work, I discovered that's like the kid that discovers a hammer. Suddenly, the world looks like a nail.
Yeah,
And
this is the mindset versus
yeah,
context thing. Yeah, I
yeah,
saw
right. And right. And I'm realizing it's a much bigger picture that requires some serious thought that I can't do here in the midst of a meeting, and I'm not sure I will be doing it because I have other projects. But it was humbling to really take a hard look at it and realize that it is very easy for us to think in terms of context, because that is what's around us at all times is context. But it's not at the same time world shaking. We're going to be composing from within, as I call it, our sandbox as we move forward. I think we're going to be composing tools that work with human elements like that. It has a lot of meaning to me. I don't know how to summarize it quickly and easily, but I'm just aware that it's a clash of our mindsets that I'm constantly seeing as talking over each other slightly, as we each interpret what the other is saying from our own perspective. So we have to, constantly realign, which is a normal human process. A little easier done when we have longer conversations, but I'm recognizing the weakness of a group discussion where we have very limited time to make our points and listen to others. And that's okay, and it works as good as it does, but it's just aware that there is an alignment, a much deeper one, when people can talk in more depth, or particularly one-on-one, to align thinking about specific topics. It just frustrates me that we can't make faster progress, and I don't know what the answer is yet. Over.
I think there's a way of talking that either gives you that progress or doesn't.
Well said. Okay.
That way of talking has to explicitly recognize that we each come with different meanings to terms and phrases.
Yeah.
And that is the problem that I'm addressing through what I'm calling Dictopedia.
Yes, I more deeply appreciate that you are way ahead of us there. I, for a while, was like, well, that's kind of convenient and fun that we have Dictopedia. Now I look at it as profoundly at the core. The word itself, the list itself, no, that does what it should do, as I would expect to be a list. But it is that deeper understanding. And well, again, I don't know how to apply Dictopedia. All right, let me back up one step. What I'm aware of, really came aware of in studying this in more depth, is the fact that we're generally, you and I and the others, are dealing with streams, real-time streams of thinking. And this is where going back to look at Dictopedia over here might be distracting. Oh, and yeah, all right, I can summarize this whole thing. I became very aware that while we can look at such and talk about such things as Dictopedia and context, and so on and so on, it is the fact that we really don't have the time as humans, caught up in the real stream of things, to be able to go back and make sense of it all in real time without the aid of some machine intelligence that's quickly pulling pieces together and maybe presenting us with something we can't get our hands on as quickly. I don't know. I have faith in it, but I don't know of anything that does it right now. I just see us
It's
one
that pause button we want to put on reality.
Okay. I think again, you've identified it very clearly there, succinctly as a concept. Yes, that pause button on reality. And it frustrates me, all of us, to a degree. I'm sure feel a little frustration that we aren't better understood And yet we also recognize and accept that as the reality of the nature of this kind of conversation, where we are kind of taking turns, making a quick point, and quite often that quick point comes from our mindset, and perhaps additionally from the context of the conversation that's wrapped around that at the moment. But it isn't perceived the same way by everybody. So, and it's nothing new about that. It's age old.
Yeah, each of us thinks that when we say something, it's so, earth-shakingly profound that we don't get it, why the other person doesn't get it.
Yeah. I have to laugh about it now that I'm getting to terms on that and recognize it is very okay, because that's just what is. It's not necessarily that I'm failing to do something, although I could do better, I'm sure, still and all.
Well, Stan, if you understand that concept, it would be fascinating for me to see you and Dino have that conversation, because Dino gets frustrated quite a bit about why I don't get it, or why Froda doesn't get it, or why nobody else gets it. And if you get it, why we don't get it, it would be a good conversation to have, because I've tried that multiple times with Dino, so I might rub him raw, whereas you and he don't have that history. Over.
Yes, that would be converting my theoretical interests into something practical, and that is really what, that's kind of where I'm at these days, wanting to actually do things that work, that help us move a step forward. I don't know where it'll take us.
It would help the teamwork of this particular group, actually.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Now, I have a more important issue to bring to you personally right now, that I've been re-looking at some of Froda's work, and we're talking about Time Browser. And I'm aware that you guys have been talking about taking this forward towards perhaps a startup that's funded and so on. I sent to you guys, how did I send it to you? I sent you a link, I believe, in an email yesterday, in an article that just simply brought to the attention that startups now are moving away from, it sounds like a great idea, let's fund it, to you better show me, the investor, that this is going to really make a profound difference. And it occurs to me that is not a fundamental judgment on the worth of any given project so much as it is, how do we approach it succinctly and quickly up front, so that we have developed a really powerful message that says this is what's fundamentally basic and so important. And that's what troubles me. And I'm talking to you about you, Froda. I'm wanting to see this statement evolve. From my perspective, perhaps it's already there and I haven't quite recognized it yet. Over.
So I am not sure that that's the right filter. If I heard you say that it's
I didn't hear anything. Could you please just give me a 30-second summary?
Stan was just talking about a email that he just sent this morning about how projects or ventures need to be thinking about the investor who really cares.
And the article that I was quoting from made a very good statement. They said investors are no longer interested in things that are nice to have. We must really filter through all the very many nice enhancements and nice to haves and get down to what's core and can compete for funding, VC funding, based on something that's fairly profound. And I suggest that Time Browser fits into the category of, first, it's nice to have, no doubt about it. But I believe now that I'm into it, there's something pretty profound here. But I don't think it's been summarized for the sake of the investors to look at to say, wow, this is game changing. And this is why we need to fund it. And I don't know that you guys are there yet. See, I'm out of touch with just what your thinking is. So I just threw that article and suggest you look at it and reflect on it and see if that helps shape this dialogue moving forward.
So I have two thoughts on that. Number one, we haven't targeted investors as a constituency. And I think that's a long conversation.
Okay.
Number two, even if we were to target investors as a constituency, we've not yet created that investment proposition presentation. So
I agree.
those I think are in play. But
Okay.
I'm sure Froda has even stronger words on that one.
Well,
I agree. We have to do two things. I mean, Ed was bringing up a very similar point to you yesterday, Stan. And
by the way, hey, Froda, you're seemingly far from the mic, or the mic is doing something different today.
I'm not far from the mic at all.
Okay, that's better.
That's better.
Oh, it's different now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I believe there's two things. You're saying something very similar to what Ed was saying yesterday, and investors of either their money or just users investing their time, absolutely, it must be communicated to be compelling. I think that the most pressing thing, though, is for us to make this real, because there's so much talk and philosophy and positioning and all of that. That's great, but it's easier to understand something once you can use it, right?
Well, that's why I'm trying to have that conversation with Dan Espenson today. I think, he's one of the quicker ways that we could actually get something demonstrable and actually functional. Now, you probably have your team as well, but Dan at least, has a scenario where he may not need a lot of money in order to get started. And that's what I want to explore with him.
Yeah, that's very good. I mean, we do need to decide on a few things. Today, I think it would be very good if we could spend a few seconds, and I'm not joking, I just mean first a few seconds on your language diagram. Then we go into some interface design that you've done before. And then we go back to your language diagram, because I think the language becomes clearer when we look at what we're talking about. Do you have those layouts that you showed quite a while ago?
Let me bring them up and let me share my screen. Let me start here and do a share screen on my. Okay, so this is an early version of something that was the annotation model and the event recording model. And this is probably not the one you were talking about, but then there's this concept map. And then there's this one from a different conversation. And then there's this. This is probably the one you're talking about. Right?
This is the one that I'm talking about, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think we need to solve the really basic things of, let's say we use this conversation as an example. We're all recording high resolution audio. Where do we store it? Where do we put it together? And how do we share it with each other? I'm talking about local storage versus server, cloud, all that stuff.
Okay. To me, this is actually not a hard question, but
okay, well, tell me then, because I think it's an interesting one.
Okay, so as you have pointed out, whether or not my quote-unquote my space exists on my local drive or my cloud really is irrelevant, I think, for the purposes of that particular question. But for me, I think I will always have some place in the cloud, which is where I put my stuff, okay? And that's what I've been calling my home. On the other hand, there is something that is pertinent to a place where the three of us meet, right? So think of it as the Zoom room, or think of it as the Skype room, or think of it as the DKR room, right? So we've got this thing called this DKR room, and so let's call this, see this room object in the middle, okay? So that room can persist, and that room can contain more than one event, right? So today it has an event like the one that we're in right now. Yesterday.
Hang on. Is a room the equivalent of a channel name, or is it a place for physical storage?
It is both. In other words, we have an identity for a channel, and it contains the records of the events that have been held there.
Okay, well, let me just ask the really basic questions.
Okay.
Your high resolution audio and video file,
yeah.
Where would you want to store it? And how would I get access to it?
All right, so for me, mine go in my home. Okay, and if I choose to share it, they also go into this room but also means that it's just a link. It's a soft link. In other words, it appears both places. So if I choose to share it from my home to my room, there's two ways to get at it. Either I can go to my home and get it, or I can go to the room and get it, but it's the same file, okay? Now, if you choose to do the same thing, you've done it in your home, you've also shared it with this room, and Stan has done the same thing. So in the room are 3 separate video recordings and 3 separate audio recordings. Then we have the function that is required to actually merge the 3 or stick them together.
I'm asking something much simpler. I'm saying, in order for the sharing to be possible, do we want to build our own server infrastructure, maybe on top of Amazon S3, or do we want to use SoundCloud with links, or what do we want to do?
Okay, so I think the short form of the answer is we use SoundCloud. The long form of the answer is we use Amazon S3.
Okay, so that means we have this recording, and I think in the beginning we have agreed it's going to be public, like coffee shop level public. So if we have audio and video, we might as well just post it straight to YouTube, right?
Yes. YouTube gets the video and audio is on SoundCloud.
Or YouTube would get both, right?
There's no reason to have audio in YouTube.
There's no reason not to.
Actually, there is. I mean, SoundCloud has the ability for you to attach comments at a particular time tag, which I don't believe YouTube does, or I could be wrong.
You can, but the thing is, our software would be the front end for that. I'm basically now talking about storage.
Mm-hmm.
So if we make the version 1 that the audio or is stored in one of these publicly, audio or audio video stored in one of these publicly addressable services, then our system needs to manage the internal timeline, the annotations and all that stuff.
And the merged file, yes.
Right.
And the transcripts and the other annotations.
The merged file could probably be also exported onto YouTube, because in YouTube, in the comments there, we could put in, this is a result of so-and-so and so-and-so automatically.
We could do that. We could say Stan's, Froda's, and Sam's video files or audio files have been merged, and here's the location.
Just writing a note. Right. Okay. Do you have your diagrams of interfaces for the recording bit?
Let me see if I have that, because I think I threw it away when you didn't like it.
No, it wasn't that I didn't like it, but it was the timing, and you know, I've been very bossy with that, and I literally.
Okay, so it's not in this file, so it might be in the email that I actually sent. I know I sent it on, I believe I sent it on email. I could be wrong. Yeah, I don't find the UI mockup here.
Right. How do we, in this Zoom thing, can we do, is there a text channel or there is chat?
Yes, there is. Although we've not been using it, I've been using Skype since that's where the multi-year history has been.
I'm just putting in a link there to, because we need to write the visual mock-up on the bottom is just to make it easy to remind us of what's missing.
Mm-hmm.
The features list we should probably finalize quite soon.
Yes, and in fact, I said I would take the action item to create a project with this, and I've still not released that to you guys for review. Let me suggest that I do that for tomorrow.
Right. Okay. Hang on. I'm just opening the thing here.
Anyway, we've not yet gone very deep into this object model. Should we keep going on that? I think all the questions you're asking are good. This is what it's intended to do, is drive our common understanding and especially drive some design discussions. But that's why this object model exists. Okay? It's not supposed to be right. It's supposed to be stimulating. Okay?
Yeah.
So let me push forward on that one. You guys can interrupt me if you like, okay? Just one second. Hey, Veronica, can you heat up your lunch? Okay, all right. All right, so here's the deal, okay? We each are these things called person objects. What is it? Oh, yeah. Did you email it to me? Okay, you got to email it to me, okay? All right, so each person objects can be themselves or they can be members of groups. So this group would, in my model
How is a person defined?
Huh?
How is a person defined?
Let's say right now, somebody with an email. How about that?
Can you write that in there?
Yes.
As per email address, right?
Okay. Make sense?
Yes, fine.
Okay. All right. So groups, of course, are ways to collect these people and name them. So in a group could be something like the DKR team or the Amigos team or the KF 2012 participants, right? That could be a group. Now, a group can own objects in their home, okay? And they can also have...
Hang on, the home, what is that? Is that storage?
Yes, that is storage. And it's also a place where you actually control access. So in other words, in my home, I have my recordings and I get to pick, oh, this one I can share with Foda, this one I share with Foda and Stan, this one I don't share, or that one I share with Gail. That's where I get to control that.
Do you think we should do that for version 1?
No, because right now everything is public.
Okay, so
but eventually, of course, that's going to be key because you need identity, and identity is going to figure in with access control.
Could you change the name to include the word storage? Home/storage or something? Just remember the old nonsense term of a web page and having a home page. You know, it doesn't really actually mean anything.
Okay. Is that better?
So much fun making you work. So initially that will be SoundCloud and YouTube, right?
Yes. So let's say can you guys read that? Is that text too small?
It's fine.
Okay. Okay. So persons and groups can have homes, okay, and therefore they can share stuff with others. So persons can share with groups, groups can share with persons. This is all done via this home storage location. Then there are these rooms. So for example, each of us knows that there's an Amigos room, there's a DKR room, there's a MOAD 50 room, there's probably personal rooms that we have just one-on-one. So that's where this room concept comes in. And that's where now in a room, which is associated with a person or group, because you know these rooms have access control. So certain groups and certain people have access to those rooms. Obviously, in version 0, everybody has access. But now these events can get scheduled in this room. So there's the April 4th event, which is this one for this room. There's the April 3rd event, if we choose to have the Sunday call there recognized. Then there's last, Tuesday's event. That's all happening in this particular room, right? So multiple events can be associated with a room, each with a different time. You wanted this concept of conference. I think conference is not necessary in V0. So I think we don't need to actually put this there. But eventually, conference will be multiple different rooms, multiple different events, all clustered together, you know, with its own set of access controls and naming. Okay. But
What's the difference between speech and utterance?
okay, so a speech is when I say from now to, let's say, 5 minutes from now, when I, you know, finally stop talking, that's my speech, right? But an utterance, hopefully, is something that we can partition into a phrase or a confirmation or a sentence or a question. Those, to me, are atomic utterances. Those are things that have punctuation separating them from other utterances. So if I say yes, that's an utterance. If I say no, that's an utterance. If I say really, that's an utterance. If I say, Froda, you need to send me that email, that's an utterance.
Do we have any friends who are advanced linguists?
We do. I have many such.
Can you ask them to, can you send them an email and ask them what language they would use?
Yes.
Because even if we have someone who is kind of in the field, because we've taken Jack's language of annotations and stuff.
Yeah. It's not Jack's language, by the way. It's IBM's language.
No, absolutely, but kind of via Jack. No, I know it's from Watson and so on. But we've adopted that language to fit that field. Let's make sure we use proper linguistics terms.
Okay, I will include that. By the way, when I typed that, was there a box that you didn't see that popped up? Like here?
Yeah, there's a box I cannot read. It's kind of grayed out.
Okay, all right. Okay, so anyway, these terms can change. That's the beauty of Dictopedia. We can change these terms, but their associations are clear, right? So in other words, if there's a speech there's a person that's giving that speech. If I've been speaking for 5 minutes, you know that it's me. And then that speech can be broken up into separate utterances or statements, okay?
What I would like, okay, let me just tell you a few changes I would like made. Don't do any of them, whether you agree or not, just to see if we're on the same page, kind of. I would like you to remove utterance. I would like you instead to add, no, just remove it, because inside speech, there will be all kinds of different things that you were talking about, and I think that's covered by that. Because that's what's, the way I read your diagram, you have a human being doing a recording of speech that goes into, the word recording probably also change that into a record or a recorded document. Because it's not the act of recording, it's basically the file or the document, right?
I mean, this thing here.
Yeah.
Yeah, a recording that's either an MP3 file or an MP4 file or something else.
Yeah, but that's why I would like you to change the name, because recording is also a verb.
Okay, so what do you want that called?
Record. The record, or a record maybe. Right. Are you okay with deleting utterance?
No, I'm not, because there's something that is a subset of a speech. So we can change the names if you like, but I don't want to remove that concept.
I want you to remove it because I think that inside speech, that's where we need to.
This is inside speech. An utterance, a speech to utterance is a one-to-many association.
I know, but in this, because it goes from person to utterance and person to speech, I would say it's a bit messy, because what I think we will see over time is inside speech, you will also have annotations. You will have, and annotations can be many different types of things. So it's just, they're just aspects of that. In the same way that person, room, group, and events, they will have aspects. I don't think we need to show them here.
The whole point of an object model is to understand the terminology and the things that we are trying to create behavior around, okay? So if you don't put them here, then we can't describe their behavior.
Yeah, okay. I still don't think it should be like that. Let me just think for a second. Why don't you connect annotation to record then? And but yeah, within speech, I really don't think we need utterances there, because there will be so many ways to chop it and decide what, there can be, because you're saying speech is the whole thing and then an utterance is small that, but what do we call the act of everything said today?
Yeah, that's a different way of slicing this. But what I'm looking at is, let's say the speech is that entire 3-minute thing, right? From when I start talking to when I end talking. And the utterances can be sliced versions of that, but it's still the raw record, right? Whereas the annotation itself is now different. It's a transcription or a translation or an identification or a big data assessment of something that happened. But the utterance itself is still part of the raw thing.
Yeah, it is, and that's why it should be under there. If you replace the word speech with pizza, I don't think we need a one that says...
By the way, you're far from the mic, so it's hard to hear you now, Fred.
If you replace the word speech with pizza, right, I don't think where you have utterance, you would need to say quarter pizza, slice of pizza, whole pizza, eighth of a pizza. I don't think we need that. But annotation is the same as toppings.
No, why do you think it's not necessary to indicate, yeses and nos and questions and statements separately?
That would be an issue between, that would have to be annotated. Because it's not...
No, the annotation is the demarcation of those beginning and end points. But the utterances themselves are still the raw object.
Yeah, but what you have person here, right? In person, you don't have a subset for organization or location or anything like that. There are so many aspects of person will come out of this. I just think that utterance is a subset of speech. It's hugely important, but I don't think it should be visualized as its own box.
I don't think you quite get the concept of an object model. An object model is designed to capture all the nouns that we're talking about. You can read the noun, but the object, of the thing that we're talking about still exists.
Sam, the very definition of a model is to include only that which is relevant. Otherwise, it's not a model.
The object model, as I see it, is to encapsulate behavior around objects. So if we're trying to specify the behavior of what we're trying to build, and we ignore some of these objects, then we cannot specify them.
Yeah, but I think it's just this utterance is just, first of all,
we don't have a problem with that word. I understand that. We can call it something else.
First of all, we don't know if that's the right vocabulary to use.
It doesn't matter. There's a thing that I've already defined, and you want to invalidate that definition, which I don't understand.
Well, I feel that we need to get a very useful model, and I think that we need to have subsets. So I definitely think that utterance is something that should go under speech. And similarly, in annotations, going to be automatic annotations, manual annotations, shared annotations. You don't need to put them on here, or do you want to put them on here?
Eventually they will. Once we flesh out, this object model in, the detail that we want, that somebody can actually build this.
Well, doesn't the brain thing support subsections? So
this is not a brain, by the way. This is a different thing now.
Right.
This is something called axon.
Okay, well, yeah. I don't know. I mean, Stan, do you want to have utterance on there, or do you think that should be later, or how do you feel?
My reaction to this is it reminds me when you speak, Frodo, use the word speech, that you're intending that be hierarchical with a subset of objects under it, components of it. Sam is speaking to a way of bringing out the important subset, and you're putting it all on the same plane, suggesting that you've got to understand the nature of this diagram versus, as you mentioned, the brain or other such things. It's more a matter of form for a specific tool, because we're all in agreement, I believe, that all those components, even the ones we don't have listed here, are all yet a part of speech. So the only question remaining is, what's the purpose of this diagram as to whether it should be showing the subparts at this point or not? Over.
Anyway, thank you, Stan, but one thing I want to say is, if you're not familiar with object diagrams, Frodo, that's one thing. But if you are, and you're making a clear distinction about why this should not be in the object model, that's a different argument. What I'm right now trying to think about is the question I'm posed to you is, are you familiar with object models and object diagrams?
Yeah, I believe I am. And obviously we're talking about maybe different degrees, but I just feel we should have a top level diagram, and then you should be able to drill into any of these for further attributes. I mean, record itself will have a huge set of language about what goes on in there.
Agreed.
So there's just, it seems to me that an utterance is such a clear subset of speech. It's not, because nothing else here is really a subset, it leads to something else.
It is the different object, okay? So composition is something that you can model in an object diagram, but it's still a separate object, Froda. In other words, a paragraph is a different object than a document. And in an object model, you would have both. You wouldn't eliminate a paragraph object simply because you had the document object. Likewise, you wouldn't eliminate a sentence object.
If you have a good, if you have a good word processor, you would be able to do a different hierarchy where you hide and show things depending on the depth. Because I would say that
that's not an object model, Froda.
I would say that in speech, as recorded audio file, there are no utterances. The utterances comes out based on some sort of analysis.
Yes.
In the audio file, they're not inherently there, right?
Yes.
So therefore,
the speech doesn't exist. Even the speech does not exist. There's only the record. The speech only comes out when there's been some analysis done.
Absolutely. So therefore, I would say that utterance and all of this is a type of annotation.
Well, then eliminate speech as well, right?
Okay, audio.
Eliminate annotation as well.
No, not annotation. Annotation is something.
No, because you're saying if there's analysis done, then you have these objects. And if you want to invalidate it based on that, then the annotation doesn't exist unless the analysis is done, right? But once the analysis is done, now you have annotations, now you have speeches, then you have utterances. So all of them require analysis off of the record. So do you want to keep all three or do you want to eliminate all three?
Obviously, you and I do the technical sides in very different ways. What I would like is to have a means to find out some sort of audio is recorded. Where does it go? What happens to it? How do people get it? Okay. Right, so if you want to change the word speech to audio file.
No, audio file is a record. So this record here, that's like an MP3 file, that's an AU file, or that's an MP4 file, right? A speech is something you have extracted as say, for this 30 seconds, that's Froda giving a speech. For that 15 seconds, that's Stan giving a speech, right? That's what a speech is. It's got to have some analysis done on that record for us to actually call it out as an object.
Well,
but if you only want the raw record, that's it. And we can eliminate all these three objects, the annotation, the utterance, and the speech.
So why is there no line between person and record? Why does it go via room and event?
There is. I mean, this is just still an incomplete model because if I have that line there now, it's crossing a lot of different objects. What I'm trying to do right now is get the objects identified before we get all the associations and connections correct. This is work in progress. So what I'm saying is, yes, I can get rid of utterance and speech, but then we should also get rid of annotation because fundamentally they're the same kind of thing. So I'm still trying to figure out what it is you're trying to understand.
Yeah, I guess I'm also trying, I know you've said it a couple of times, but I'm also trying to understand what you're trying to show because, to me, it's quite simple in a way. And I guess we're looking at it quite differently.
Can I answer that question? Okay. So what I'm trying to show is eventually when we have this record object, we want something that identifies the speech or the multiple speeches. Okay. So there's going to be something implemented in code that takes a record and says, okay, there are 17 speeches in this record and they're provided by Stan, Froda, and Sam. Okay. And then furthermore, this speech will have multiple statements or utterances, whatever, okay, those will be called out by a different piece of software, okay? And then there'll be some annotation that says, okay, this annotator can identify this is Froda, this is Stan, this is Sam, so that's a different kind of annotation object that's going on here, okay? So that's what's being modeled here. We can't specify behavior unless we have these objects. Now, if we want no such analysis done, and we just want to have the record, and we just want to have CRUD operations on the record, then fine, let's eliminate those objects, right? But the annotation, the speeches, the utterances, the identification, to me, those seem useful, and those seem like necessary for a V0. That's why they're in here. By the way, conference, I don't think is a V0, so we can eliminate that, for example. And if you want to only focus on V0, then fine, let's get rid of all three of these too. But I suggest that we have some notion of annotation, some notion of identifying speakers as part of V0. Otherwise, just saving audio files and video files, that's already doable. That we're not adding a lot of value if that's all this is.
All right, okay.
So then, would a second diagram that includes speech utterance, annotation, etc., all as emanating from record, is that the more hierarchical approach that I think you're addressing, Froda?
Yeah, I really don't know. I just think we have extremely different mental models.
Yeah.
Well, that's why we have this diagram, is so we can tease out these conversations, okay? This is not meant to be correct, but it is meant to stimulate these questions. And I am trying to respond to your questions.
Yeah, I just don't see how we're ever going to make this happen.
Froda,
Right? Let me finish. Because, the whole notion of utterance and all of that, with that, we're really in very sophisticated territory.
No, we're not. There are pieces of software that do that.
Okay.
We do not have to create all these algorithms. What we need to do is integrate the right capabilities from the right third-party libraries. But I still submit to you that if we take away annotation, utterance, and speech, like this is not a very interesting system.
Yeah, I understand that. But I mean, I don't understand the difference between a room and an event. I don't understand the concept of a group. I don't see this as an analogy for meeting rooms in a building. All I'm trying to do is work with you guys to create a system where people record their sound, it's transcribed, and then you can interact with it later. So, we had the notion of a channel, but that wasn't agreed. So then we changed the notion of a room.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be useful to discuss notions of how is a room created and shared.
I think that's a good conversation to have.
Because this group thing, okay, explain what a group is and how it differs from an event in a room.
I don't see how that's difficult. A group is a set of people that has a name, and therefore it has permissions. It can schedule events in rooms. It can have meetings. It can share files.
But we're not doing permissions for version 1, right?
Right, but still, I think it's a useful concept for us to have the notion of a group. Otherwise, we're constantly retyping names over and over and over and over again.
How do you want these things to be stored? Can you stop highlighting things, please? It's a bit distracting. We're storing in home, we're storing, that is the further writing, I believe, is SoundCloud.
Yes,
And,
this we said was either SoundCloud or YouTube.
Right. So where do we want to store the annotations and the transcripts and all of that stuff in this model?
Okay, so I think everything having to do with an event.
What is an event in this context?
Event is, let's say, the April 4th, 2016 DKR call, which is this thing.
So it's time by room.
We're in.
So is it time by group or time by person?
It's time. It's time in a room associated with a group. So in other words, look at this, okay? It's not associated with people because halfway through this event, you joined, right? Initially, it was me and Stan. Now, it wasn't a new event when you joined. It was already going. So it's not associated with people yet, okay? There's an event associated with a room, and that should be sufficient to define, what was happening.
Why don't you put the core thing in here, which is time?
Okay, time is associated with pretty much everything here. So let's put time. Let's see, where do we put time?
Well, it has to be associated with event, at least.
Right, it is associated with event.
So event equals time plus room.
It's probably an association with record as well.
So event equals time plus room, right?
Yes. That's right. In a room at a specific time, there's an event.
Right.
By the way, I'm now about 3 minutes beyond where I said I was available. This is good conversation, however. I think we're asking good questions here.
Yeah, well, maybe it's the Mac Windows difference in mentality. I just feel I see it in very different ways.
Why do you have to use those terms? Why do you have to, specify such a...
I'm just wondering if we just quite visually think a bit different.
That's natural, right? That's why we're having questions. Why should that be a problem?
I'm just having a hard time understanding some of this, and I'm having a hard time kind of trying to get to the next stage of this.
Okay. Would you like to come up with your own diagram, Frode?
Well, yeah, maybe.
Because remember when we did the time browser thing, with the different levels, I had my diagram, you had your diagram. You were able to understand your diagram by, extracting those pieces in my diagram that made sense to you. This, by the way, this is not a Windows thing. This is an app that can run almost anywhere. The Windows operating system does not have this capability, does not have these conventions.
Yeah, no, I understand. Okay. Right. Okay. So you're over time.
Can we save this? I'm gonna take everything here. I'm gonna send it around since we have a snapshot here. And we can continue this hopefully tomorrow. And I will, if I'm diligent, bring a version of this in AHA for you guys to review, okay?
Right, okay, all right, talk to you later.
Frode, I hope things are going okay, but let's talk separately, okay?
Okay, bye.
All right.
Okay, guys.
All right, see you. Bye for now.
Yeah. Bye-bye.